Good afternoon. It is November 8th, 2020, 4 p.m. on the East Coast, 1 p.m. on the West Coast. Welcome to another edition of And That's the Game. I'm Matt Gillis. If you have already seen my Instagram, my Twitter, my TikTok, my Facebook this afternoon, you already know what I'm about to say. College football pollsters, what in the God's name is wrong with you guys? How in the world does Notre Dame beat Clemson? Yes, in overtime. Yes, without Trevor Lawrence. Yes, with Clemson losing a bunch of players due to injuries during the game. How in the God's name does Notre Dame beat Clemson, the number one ranked team in the nation, and end up number 2 behind Alabama? Yes, Alabama is undefeated as well. Yes, Alabama plays in the SEC. Yes, Notre Dame is playing in the ACC this year only because of COVID protocols and having to play a conference-only season. But how in the world do we keep getting it wrong year after year after year as to how teams are respected in the college football polls? It makes no sense to me why a team that was third or fourth, depending on which poll you are looking at, plays the number one team in the country and beats them and ends up number 2 behind Alabama. I have all the respect for the SEC. It's a great conference. There are a lot of great teams. But the SEC isn't even today what it used to be. In fact, I would actually say the ACC has better football than the SEC. Sure, some people will debate that one saying, well, but LSU won the national championship over an ACC school. But look at what the ACC has done. Look at the number of teams that it has put into the top 5, the top 10 over the past years. Look at the number of teams it's put into the college football playoffs. Look at the number of teams that have come out of it with a national championship. Yes, Clemson was the only one. But what I'm saying is, when you put all of that together, how in the God's name is Alabama number 1 over a Notre Dame team that just beat the number 1 team in the nation? For those of you who don't know the history of Notre Dame football too well, this isn't the first time this has happened. In fact, in my lifetime, this is about the 20th time this has happened. Notre Dame consistently gets gypped in the rankings. Whether it's where they get placed in the preseason rankings, a number 10 ranking in a preseason poll for Notre Dame is a godsend. Anything higher than that, and we might think the pollsters are drunk. To be able to get into the college football playoffs, Notre Dame has to go undefeated. To just even get into a New Year's Day 6 bowl game, Notre Dame has to only have 1 loss on the season. To just be able to get into a bowl game that actually isn't the Gator.com bowl, Notre Dame has to have only 2 losses in a season. A 3-loss Notre Dame season, and they're playing in the, I don't know what, but it might be considered the Lysol Tidy Bowl. And we've seen that happen. A 10-3 season in Notre Dame football is considered a disaster. A 10-3 season in most other schools is considered a success. But that's Notre Dame football. Remember, outside of the pandemic, Notre Dame plays an independent schedule. Well, albeit they have a relationship with the ACC, Notre Dame had 6 ACC games originally on its schedule this season. One of those games, last night's Notre Dame Clemson game. That game, pandemic or not, was going to be played. It was going to be played at Notre Dame Stadium. And it was going to be a game in which was going to feature 2 top 5 teams. It did. It may have featured Trevor Lawrence as the quarterback instead of DJ Uiagalelei, who, by the way, has clearly cemented himself as a phenomenal college football quarterback and should be in the talks for Heisman Trophy should he have a full season under center for Clemson and a number 1 draft pick in the NFL. But Notre Dame should be getting a lot more respect than it is getting. Brian Kelly has done nothing short of phenomenal. While he hasn't delivered a national championship yet, he's certainly put the Notre Dame Fighting Irish on the precipice of it so many times. They've gone to a couple of national championship games. Were their defense a little bit better, Nick Saban might have a couple of fewer national championships than he does at Alabama. But here's what I say to all of this. The regular season needs to be respected in a way that's different than how it's handled. I appreciate the college football polls. But if it's simply win and you move up a slot if the team above you loses, regardless of who the team below may have beaten that removed that upper team, is not the way it should work. Now, granted, if Notre Dame was a 25, 24, 23, 22, 21, maybe even 20, and beat number 1 Clemson, a la Appalachian State beating Michigan a decade ago, you're going to sit here and say, well, that was an embarrassing upset. Citadel over Alabama. But you're not going to put them number 1. Maybe they hit 15 or even 10. Notre Dame was 3rd on one poll. They were 4th on another. If the top 4 teams are your CFP playoff teams, and that was a semifinal game, 1 versus 4, Notre Dame goes to the national championship game. So how is it that Notre Dame ends up 2 and Alabama ends up 1? Notre Dame leapfrogged Georgia. Georgia lost to Florida. Fairly said. But is Alabama better than Notre Dame right now? We're not going to know the answer because Alabama won't play Clemson this year, nor will they play Notre Dame unless it's the college football playoffs and the national championship. Now, here's a bizarre situation. Notre Dame's going to have to go through Clemson again in the ACC championship game, unless Clemson somehow loses to somebody else on the road. Notre Dame could potentially find themselves on the opposite side of the bracket, and we could end up with a Notre Dame-Clemson national championship game. But until that being said, Notre Dame's undefeated. Alabama's undefeated. Between those two schools, Notre Dame's the only one who has beaten a number 1 ranked team this year. Shouldn't Notre Dame be number 1? That's the game for November 8th, 2020. Thank you all for tuning in. We are off tomorrow, so we'll be back on Tuesday as we begin a very special week of shows for both And That's the Game and Sports World Weekly as we come to you live from around the state of Rhode Island. You're not going to want to miss this one, so tune in on Tuesday at 4 p.m. and see where we pop up then. Until then, stay safe, socially distance, wear a mask, wash your hands, listen to the public health professionals, and we'll all be together in a stadium cheering on our favorite teams very soon. Take care. Have a good night.